Hello and welcome. I hope that you and your families are safe and healthy during this unprecedented time. I'm Stephen Krein, President and CEO of CERC, and I'll moderate the discussions today as we review the fundamentals of relocation in this, our very popular program, RELO 101. It's an understatement, perhaps, to say that this is a very trying time for all of us, and most importantly for our families and employees. The importance of an employer's duty of care has never been greater than it is at this time. And there's no playbook for the events that are coming at us on a daily basis in the mobility industry. Our speakers today will share some very helpful tips that will help you navigate some of those challenges. We know that the situation is changing rapidly with COVID, and CERC will do our very best to keep you updated. CERC recently developed a COVID resources page on the CERC website. Here you can share your experiences, provide us with helpful tools, articles that you may have prepared or come across. There are also valuable links to government resources from Canada, the United States, Europe, and many other countries across the globe, providing information with regards to travel bans, public health issues, and immigration matters. So thank you for being with us today as we present the first in this three-part series of webinars that will introduce the fundamentals of relocation management. The RELO 101 program is an exceptional opportunity to learn more about the industry, its various components, terminologies, and complexities. It's also a great introduction to our relocation certification program, which is hosted in partnership with Seneca College here in Toronto. We're moving the program over to Seneca in May of this year. There are 3 levels to the program. Level 1 is the Canadian Employee Relocation Specialist. Level 2 is the Canadian Employee Relocation Professional. And level 3 is the Canadian Global Mobility Professional. The next semester starts on May 12th, so this is an excellent time to enroll in the program. Registration is now open. Laura, there we go. Okay. I'm pleased to welcome our panel of experts this afternoon, who I'll introduce more fully in a few moments, but a couple of housekeeping events. Today's event will end promptly at 3. We've allowed time for Q&A at the end of the session. You'll notice on the side of your screen there's a chat box. You can send us your questions throughout the session, and we'll be gathering those up, and we'll get to them in the last 15 or so minutes of the session. 2 continuing education credits will be issued for those of you holding the CERC professional designations, which I just referred to a few moments ago. If you need any information on that, drop us an email here at info@CERC for more information. I would like to say thank you to Weikert Workforce Mobility for their continued generous support in providing the delivery platform and their assistance in coordinating today's webinar. There's no doubt that the complexities involved in moving employees today are on the increase, and with the onset of COVID, the COVID virus, those complexities have multiplied. So it's vitally important that companies have the best programs and policies in place to manage their global mobility programs. And so to our presenters this afternoon, it's my great pleasure to once again welcome our panel of experts who have been presenting RELO 101 at the CERC conference and CERC webinars over the past several years. They have a wealth of expertise and practical experience that they will share in today's presentation. I'll begin with Tricia Cochran. Tricia has been in the relocation industry for 22 years. Over the past 10 years, she was Director of Client Services North America for a leading RMC, and she is a distance learning instructor through Seneca College and Ontario Learn. One of Tricia's great passions is the development of talent in our industry, and she welcomes the opportunity to encourage and grow those new to the industry at every opportunity. She has served on the CERC Board of Directors, where she served as chair. She is a member of our Subject Matter Expert Program Steering Committee and the CERC's Research Committee. She has received multiple awards through CERC, including the Distinguished Meritorious and Leader Awards for her contributions to CERC and the relocation industry over many years. Lisa Hewlett is Vice President, Business Development with Server Relocation Canada. Here she's responsible for new business growth. She has over 25 years of experience in the relocation, marketing, and social work sectors. Prior to joining Server, she was with United Van Lines, and she was the Vice President of Business Development for Prudential Relocation for 10 years. Tricia holds the SCERP, CGMP designations from CERC, a GMS designation from WERC, and she received the President's Award for contributions to the industry. She is also a certified Relocation 101 trainer. Lisa was a visionary for the education program as part of the steering committee that originally developed the program back in 2001. And Lisa also served on the CERC board and chaired the board of directors. Finally, Cindy Mulhall, Senior Canadian Mobility Professional, has more than 25 years experience in the human resources field and has specialized in corporate relocation in the oil and gas industry for the past 15 years. Cindy also served on the CERC board of directors and held the position of chair. In 2013, Cindy was recognized by CERC as the first recipient to achieve and receive the CERC Leader Award. In 2012, she received the Chair's Award for her outstanding contribution to CERC and the industry. She is also a distance learning instructor at Seneca for the Canadian Global Mobility Professional Program. Ladies, welcome. It's a pleasure to be working with you again this afternoon. And I think I hand it over to Tricia to start us off.
Lisa.
Lisa. Okay, Lisa. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Steve, and thank you, CERC, for your leadership throughout this unprecedented pandemic. Never before has it been as important to be a member of CERC and to get the updates from CERC on how it's impacting our members, our industry. So thank you, Steve and CERC. So it's my pleasure to be here today. Talking about something that is so close to all of our hearts. We love the relocation industry. Once you're in, it's you never want to leave, or at least I didn't. But I'd like to first start with the history of the relocation industry. Like, where did it begin? Where did it start? Well, in Canada, it developed as corporations, in the US particularly, and then it came north, became concerned with changes in federal budgets, tax changes, costs, policies, and how relocation programs fit with business expansion. Relocation services includes a range of internal business processes to transfer employees, their families, and/or entire departments of a business to a new location. So sectors came together to study, evaluate, and communicate information on best practices and procedures in relocation of employees. When the worldwide ERC started, Canada, corporations in Canada belonged to that. But what we found, which is fairly typical for Canadians, is that many of our issues were not challenges in the US and vice versa. Our tax laws were different, etc. So corporations in Canada and members from the supplier community founded on October 22nd, 1982, the Canadian Employee Relocation Council. We have over 600, in fact, I'm sure it's grown, Steve, from that, over 600 members from across Canada, the United States, and internationally. What makes our industry so unique is the fact that we are not an industry of all just salespeople or lawyers or dentists or accountants. We are an industry of so many different players, which makes it so fascinating. We have, of course, the most important player is the transferee, or which we usually call for someone who is relocating domestically within Canada, or say within the United States. An assignee is someone who is going on a global assignment outside of North America. Then we have the corporate client, and many of you on the call today may be corporate clients. You are responsible for facilitating the employee relocation program for your company. And then we have relocation management companies. Weichert, who is sponsoring today's webinar, is a relocation management company, and Server Relocation, where I work. We manage the whole relocation process on behalf of our corporate clients. Then you have moving companies, and I won't go through the entire list, but you have mortgage companies and home inspectors and legal networks, lawyers in Canada who support the relocation industry and are well versed on the home sale practices and regulations, etc. Temporary accommodations, where transferees or assignees go to live for up to a month or longer before they move into their new home. So many different constituents are involved in a successful relocation. So this is a list of the various types of relocations. So I already talked about a domestic relocation, and within the CRC in our industry, and for today's purposes, when we say domestic, we're referencing within Canada's borders. A cross-border typically means, for today's purposes, a relocation that is crossing the US or Canadian border. So it can be someone who is relocating to the US from Canada or vice versa. And then there's an international or global move or relocation or assignment, again, outside of Canada. And then there are local moves that are within a country or within a province. And then there are short-term, long-term assignments. So when an assignee is sent on an assignment, it could be from 3 months to a year. A long-term assignment could be up to 3 to 5 years. And then there are rotational. Sometimes they're known as international commuter assignments. Rotational work is job sharing on a large scale and represents a significant part of the international oil and gas scene where Cindy works. One employee could work overseas or in Northern Alberta, for example, in Fort McMurray for 28 days. And then when they finish their work cycle, they come home, and then his or her rotating partner, who has been on leave for 28 days, they come in and they work for the next 28. So that's a rotator. Then you have an expatriate, someone who is on a 2 to 3 year international assignment. An impatriate is a foreign national employee who has been transferred to work in the home country of an international organization on a temporary or permanent basis. And there are many other types, but this is sort of the most common. Very fundamental of a relocation program for any company is a relocation policy. And as with most benefits offered to employees, having a well-defined policy is essential. A policy will explain provisions available and will help contain costs for the company. A policy should also align with current company priorities and goals. And what that means, for example, is I would imagine when this coronavirus is over, and please God, it will be soon, and companies get back to work, I'm not sure at the time that someone would create a new policy and they want to spend a lot of money and there's no budgets, it's just whatever. I think people will be really looking at controlling costs. So we really advise companies to make sure that the policy aligns with your corporation's goals and objectives at the time. Types of employee to be relocated. Well, quite often within a company, they will look at high potential, high performers. Executives are very common. International new hires. Hard to hire positions, high demand positions. And there are many relocations for personal career development. There are various approaches to policy structure. There is a flexible approach, and a flexible is that it isn't a rigid policy. There are flexible benefits offered. For example, a single person who is relocating to a new location may not need spousal assistance or childcare benefits or anything like that. So it's making sure that the package fits for what the transferee needs. There's tiered approaches, like an executive level will get some additional benefits versus managers and then perhaps new hires or new grads below. Cafeteria style, that would be, for example, that everyone gets a bundle of services the same, and over, if you can imagine a screen on the side, there are different benefits listed, and the hiring manager can pick off the benefits they think would most apply to that transferee. And as quite often in life, it's a combination of some or all of the above. So policy, developing a policy. So there are important things to consider. We always recommend that a policy that the person developing that looks at benchmarking. It's an important process to undertake if you are considering writing or revising your policy yourself. You can benchmark against industry best practices, and CERC is an excellent resource for that with policies, current trends, future issues, or cost-effective solutions. You might compare policy provisions based on perspectives such as key competitors, top performers, similarity in size, and or number of assignments or geographic region. Typically, you want a preliminary list of policy components. It's helpful to determine what is required in a policy. If a component has always been in the policy or has never been there, does not mean it should stay or should not be put in. For example, rental populations may have increased or decreased substantially due to current housing markets. If the relocation policy had no renter components, a savvy company would ensure that renters are taken care of in their relocation programs. And then you have to look at costs. You might need to be looking at whether or not you can write it internally, or if you need to outsource that function to, professional policy writers, third-party relocation management companies, or a consulting group. And then you need corporate approval. You can't create a policy in a vacuum. You need to make sure that you have buy-in from senior leadership, they support what is being developed, and they are behind you. You also need to make sure it's in line with the company's objectives, as I said earlier. And then you have to look at the implementation. How is this going to be rolled out? How is it to be presented and communicated to the employee population? And then you want to monitor for transferee feedback, modify as needed, and again, making sure that it is suits the corporate culture. Okay, trying to advance it and it's not going. So exceptions to policy. One of the things that we have all learned in this industry is it's not always a right answer. Quite often in a relocation, you want to make sure that the employee or the transferee is following the policy, but sometimes there are extenuating circumstances. So it's important to be flexible and creative and apply common sense, but you have to be careful and ask yourself, what's the motivation behind the request for this exception? What's the cost impact? And then finally, what is the overall impact? We always talk about people talk to each other and say, oh, Joe got this on his relocation. Oh, you didn't get that. So it's very important to know that if you do make an exception, you have to be prepared and know that it probably will get out. There may be a financial impact. So everything is important about tracking the exceptions, looking to see if everybody's asking for this and it's not in the policy, maybe it needs to go into the policy. Okay. So one of the great things that CRC does for its members is every 2 years, they do an excellent corporate relocation survey. So for program management, the 2019 CERC Policy Survey Report reported that all in-house programs account for 25% of all respondents. So that means that a company, ABC company, is managing all of the relocation transfers, etc., themselves. They're not going outside to a relocation management company for any support. And that's up 4% since 2017, which is interesting. Totally outsourced means that it's pretty hands-off, and the company literally does a call, calls a relocation management company, and they do everything. And that is 12%, which is down 3% since 2017. Again, interesting. Partially outsourced, 63%, is an example of where Cindy Mulhall, one of my colleagues who is speaking today, her company partially outsources because they have in-house people doing relocation management, as Cindy does, and they also work with relocation management companies. So the challenges that were identified to managing domestic relocations in the 2019 survey are, number one, housing at destination, 81%, very high. Number two, spousal partner career challenges, 79%. Family, 75%. Housing at departure, meaning, vacating your home, selling your home, getting out of your lease, 69%, and cost of living, 63%. And that is interesting because previous surveys indicated cost of living was quite high on the concern, but now it's housing at destination and spouse partner career challenges. So things are changing, and I'm always interested. And the 2021 survey, of course, I'm sure will be very interesting. The top 3 reasons employees decline a relocation in Canada, domestic relocation, is housing, spouse career, and family. And we always find that they're aligned with the challenges. So now I am going to turn this over to my colleague, Tricia Cochran. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Hello, everybody. I have the pleasure today of speaking to you about domestic relocation. And domestic relocation is the movement of an employee on their own or with their family within a country's borders. We're going to review some of the considerations that apply within Canada's borders. But before that, what we thought we might do is we just have to get into it. There we go. We wanted to talk a little bit about the impact on domestic programs in terms of COVID-19. So the things that we're seeing immediately, you can see the list here. Despite many employees being prepared to carry on with relocations, and taking this isolation time to get settled into their new location, the majorities of companies have put authorizations on hold at this point in time. Where we have in-process relocations underway, special considerations must be made on a case-by-case basis in order to support employees and their families who may have needs arise that would not necessarily be covered by policy. So how do we support employees who have moved to another province where they and their families must self-isolate for at least 14 days? Additionally, the marketing of homes has come to a crawl. And while most realtors will offer virtual and online tours of homes, the uncertainty of these times have precluded buyers from closing on purchases, and banks are a little scared of lending money right now as well. With the ban of much travel, the ability for employees to travel at all to the new location is becoming more and more onerous. And clearly, with all the barriers that are in place, volumes have decreased significantly, and it leaves one wondering what will happen once all those restrictions are lifted and the backlog of relocations begins to resume. As Lisa mentioned earlier, as an industry, we're very lucky to have an organization like the Canadian Employee Relocation Council to provide the thought leadership, the sharing of best practices, and timely updates on what's happening throughout the country and the industry with respect to COVID-19. Additionally, CERC works closely with government to counsel on the impacts on business and government influence on immigration matters, talent mobility, and moving through this unprecedented time of global pandemic. It's not going for, sorry, okay, here we go. We'll talk a little bit now about tax considerations as they relate to Canadian domestic relocation. So in Canada, most reimbursements are not considered taxable income. What is, however, considered taxable are any allowances over $650, or in Quebec, that would be 2 weeks' salary. Loss on sale, so if a company is providing a loss on sale program for folks selling their homes, 1/2 of the amount paid, 1/2 of that loss on sale paid over $15,000 becomes a taxable benefit. And then any subsidies paid directly to the employees, and interest on any interim financing that might be provided to the employer, to the employee. And we also encourage folks to refer to their tax professional and the CRA Employer's Guide to Taxable Benefits and Allowances. So benefits and deductibility. In terms of compliance, moves must meet the CRA requirements in the 40-kilometer test, and reimbursements must be directly related to an expense that's incurred due to the relocation. So according to CRA, when a person moves to a new home because he or she will be employed in the new community, all of the eligible moving costs are tax deductible. This is true as long as the new home brings them close to 40 kilometers closer to their new full-time employment. As regulations regarding taxations can and do change from time to time, employers should ensure that they are regularly seeking independent tax verification. In the case of items that an employee may claim or deduct on their personal tax return, the deduction is only allowable providing they are not paid for or reimbursed by the employer for the item claimed. I know that that sounds like it would be common sense, but you would be surprised what people do sometimes. So when we talk about home sale support, there are a number of different kinds of support that we have. Direct reimbursement is where we pay back the employees for their out-of-pocket expenses. Marketing assistance, we'll talk a little bit about where we support the employee in getting their home on the market in a timely and efficient manner, and then also the guaranteed home sale plan. So first, direct reimbursement. One of the things that happens here is it offers the least assistance to the employee. And what we mean by that is the least amount of hands-on management that's required by an employer. It's generally the least expensive way for an employer to support an employee that is relocating. And it's often used by companies who may or may not have a formal policy and may or may not have very few employees who are on the move. The company reimburses the employee some or all of the direct selling costs on their home. And the limitations that are typically in place are a dollar amount and an expense type. Marketing assistance is the program is designed to assist employees in an aggressive process to sell their home for fair market price. Typically, there's 2 broker price opinions obtained to educate the employee on the current market conditions of the area and recommendations as to what their home may sell at and that probable sell price. Now, when we talk about selling homes, really in the world of relocation, we sell houses, but in an employee's mind, we're selling their home. So it's very difficult to put a value on, that wall that's got the lines on it when children are growing up, and you can see that over the years how they've grown, or that they've had the children in a home, or they've celebrated all of these wonderful engagements and things together. It's difficult to put a price on that. So this is the way that we help them to understand from a realistic perspective what the house value is versus what the home value is. A guaranteed home sale plan is where the company allows their employee to market their home for a period of time, typically 90 to 120 days. The guarantee is normally calculated by averaging 2 appraisals, which are completed by accredited independent appraisers who are familiar with the area, and 2 broker market opinions and a home inspection in order to arrive at a planned price. In the event that the home is not sold, however, and the employee has purchased and closed on a new residence in the new location, this program normally allows for either the company or a third-party relocation firm like Serva or Weichert to purchase the property from the transferee and assume full responsibility for it, which allows the employee and their family to get to the new location and get on with their life without having to worry about selling their home. Another option that we have, or in addition to, we've got lump sums, managed lump sums, flexible spending allowances, miscellaneous relocation allowances. So in our 2019 survey, 76% of organizations did provide a miscellaneous relocation allowance, i.e. a cash allowance, which allowed the employee the flexibility of spending in ways that they found most meaningful to their family. We arrive at lump sum payments, typically based on a percentage of salary. It could be a fixed amount, say $5,000 or $10,000. It could depend on the home or host location and the family size. And it also can be a managed lump sum, or it can strictly, which means that the family is supported by a relocation management company or by their employer in terms of helping them to manage that amount of money, or it can be strictly paid out as a lump sum. So lump sum, one-time amount of funds estimated to cover the entire relocation process in accordance with the company's policy is provided to the employee. So this is the most hands-off approach. We just give the employee money and we say manage. Whereas the managed lump sum, the transferee is provided, as I mentioned, guidance on the best way to effectively manage that amount of money. Now let's keep in mind that many people don't have experience in moving themselves and or their family across the country. So it is helpful when we can guide them on best ways to spend that amount of money. When we were talking a little bit earlier about guaranteed home sale plans, once the home is taken over by the corporation, we have what we call property management, and that's where a home is vacated before a resale can occur. And the property management ensures that the home is managed and maintained to a high standard in order to maintain its value and also to be in compliance with insurance requirements. It can be performed on vacant or tenanted properties. Appraisals and inspections, there are various different kinds and various different reasons that we do them. They can be used in relocation to determine a fair market value for the home. We've got qualified inspectors that look after these things. We also look for things like toxic substances and provide recommendation for remediation of same. It allows us to best provide instruction on marketing periods, any incentives that we would recommend to move the home quicker, whether those be monetary or other, and offers that come in, employee listing periods, and inventory properties. And some of the typical relocation expenses that one would be concerned with, we've got the real estate commissions, legal fees and disbursements, mortgage discharge penalty, so that's when folks have to get out of their mortgage before their term has come up, any duplicate housing costs if an employee has a home, say in Toronto, and they're moving to Montreal and they have homes in each location. Those are considered to be duplicate housing costs. Any lease termination for those who are in a lease situation, house hunting trips, home purchase costs, of course, the shipment of household goods and vehicles, appraisal costs, inspections, travel to the new location, any subsidies for folks moving into a higher cost location, temporary housing where they must stay in a temporary accommodation for 30 or 60 days while they're getting settled in, or waiting to get into their new home, and also home finding services. So that brings us to our first poll question, and that is, what costs are considered to be taxable benefits in Canada? Are they A, miscellaneous allowance, B, home sale expenses, or C, travel expenses?
Some great people joining our poll. Just going to let it go for a few seconds longer here. I still see some responses coming in. All right. I think we're good. Let's share our results. There you go.
Okay, so it is the miscellaneous allowance, which would be considered a taxable benefit. So good try. We're going on to the next portion of our presentation now, and I'm going to be handing it over to Cindy. Oh, sorry, Lisa. Sorry, Lisa.
You know what? That's okay. Not a problem. Household goods moving is one of the costliest items in employee relocation. So it is important to understand the terminology, the need for a qualified mover, etc., because it has to be right. So the CERC 2019 survey, we like to find out from the survey how many of the companies that belong to CRC use carriers, do they have agreements, etc. So one or more carriers, that means that a company, say like Cindy, for example, at Suncor, and actually that's a great example. They have contracts with 2 carriers, 2 household goods moving companies that are both excellent and are qualified to do corporate moving. So it's 32%, which is down by 10% from 2017. Third-party relocation management companies such as Weichert, it's 58%, that's up 10% from 2017. And then others, there's no agreement in place, that's 10%, which means that the transferee is free to choose their own mover. We don't see that a lot in the corporate world. It's usually the first or the second. So there are a lot of different terms in the moving industry. The pricing is can be confusing, discounting, tariffs, etc. So we'll just go through some of these bullets and some of the terms. The types of relocation in the moving industry. You have corporate moving, which is what we're here talking about today. You have consumer moving. So that would be, for example, if Tricia and her husband decided to sell their home in Vancouver or Delta and move into Vancouver. That's what we call either a COD move or a consumer move. And then there's the federal government. They move thousands of people each year, typically during what we call the active posting season. We have local moves. We have like within, Mississauga or within Edmonton. We have regional moves, and then we have long distance. There are terms that you will see on a bill: the line haul, the pack, the unpack. The packing usually means, of course, that packers go into your transferee's home and are packing all of the breakables, various things into their cartons. And then there's the unpack. When they get to destination, their boxes are unpacked and placed on top of tables for the transferee to put away. There's the transferring of vehicles. Some go by rail, typically go by rail. Some actually go on a moving van. And then there's appliance servicing, and there's storage. Storage is a big part of relocation because sometimes there's a gap from when the goods leave the home site and get to destination. There may be a 4-week wait to get into the new location, and they have to store their goods. And then shuttles. Shuttles are if, for example, in Montreal or Toronto, there's a lot of small, narrow one-way streets, and the big, large moving vans cannot get down those streets. So they have to get a permit to park at the end of the street, and then they run shuttles back and forth between the employee's home and the truck. And of course, that adds on a fee. There's valuation, which is what within the household goods industry, they talk about insurance. They call it valuation. And how are the claims processed? They have terms like released, increased carrier liability, replacement cost protection. If a sofa is damaged and it's a part of a set, some valuation includes replacing the entire set versus just the one sofa. And then probably one of the most important distinctions is van lines versus agents. Corporations want to work with qualified movers. The majority of movers in Canada belong to a van line. The van line is the overreaching organization that manages the quality, the types of trucks, the training, and most importantly, the claims. They also have commitments that they have to make to their van line. So, for example, one of our agents in Canada that a lot of us are familiar with is Quality Move Management. They're an excellent corporate mover. They belong to a van line, which is Allied Van Lines. What you don't want, and I beg you to make sure that you think about this, is just, say it's fine for your transferee to pick someone who does not belong to any of the associations, Canadian Association of Movers, and they're just doing it at the cheapest price. You're going to get damage, you may have lost goods, and that is such a headache that you don't want. Then we talk about peak season. Peak season typically is in Canada, starts at the mid to the end of June and finishes on Labor Day weekend when people go back to school. So there's lots of various terms there about access issues. Will there be enough trucks? There's accessorial services that have to be considered, which means if you have expensive screen TVs or home theater systems, you will need extra assistance to put that together. And those are accessorial services that have to be hired in addition to the movers. Oh, I'm going to go back. If you would go back one, please, that would be great. Thank you. Oh, I did that. No, go forward, please. I'm so sorry. Okay. Like Tricia before me talking about the COVID-19 and the impact it's had within the household goods moving industry, there's been a huge impact. For the time being, the majority, I'd say probably 99% of all in-home surveys have been eliminated, and now movers are doing virtual surveys. So the transferee will walk, their laptop or their phone around their house, and the mover will do a virtual survey, an estimate of cost. Of course, there's increased hygiene and hand washing protocols. There's social distancing. At the actual moving warehouse, there's no more than 5 people in an office at any given time. That's the standard. And no more than 5 people in a warehouse at any given time. Quite often, when there is a move going on, and if it's continuing, and it is happening, sometimes an executive from the moving company will go and visit to make sure that the actual move is going well. They're not doing that now. That's being done virtually. Proactive customer communication to ensure that the work sites are symptom-free. So, for example, if a group of moving crew is coming to someone's home, they're asking, is everyone okay in your home? Is anyone sick? Does someone have COVID-19? Wanting to make sure that everybody's fine and that the movers themselves are symptom-free. Cancellations or postponements due to illness are hassle-free. No one is charging and saying, oh, you canceled on us at the last minute. If it's for a reason like COVID-19, it's fine. And all operations crews are receiving masks and latex gloves. So, as I spoke about before, the seasonality of the Canadian long-distance moving industry is very interesting. Majority of moves happen, the peak is usually around the end of June, July, August, and then it starts to come down in September. That ties in with the school year. Of course, right now, everything is upside down, and I'm sure if we looked at this graph at the end of this year, it would look very, very different. We all think there's going to be quite a lot of pent-up demand when this is over. But on a typical year, this is what the graph looks like in terms of volume. You have it picking up around April, because that is when the active posting season starts with the federal government. and then you have the end of June happening. So it's easy. So poll question. What is the peak season for moving industry? January to April, B, May to August, C, September to December.
All right, our pollers are polling away. All right, looks like we're all cool. I've got a couple more people voting. We'll leave it open for a few more seconds. Okay, let's see what they say. And here are our answers.
And that is correct. May to August, absolutely. Well done, everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Cindy.
Great, thanks, Lisa. So I'm going to go through some of the costs that are typical for the for a domestic relocation. And so according to the CIRC 2019 survey, the average cost to relocate a homeowner in Canada is approximately $62,600. That is a decrease of 15% since the survey that was done in 2017. This may be indicative of the depressed housing markets in Western Canada, but it also could reflect the weighting of the natural resource-based industry organizations, where a lot of the moves, especially if it's a generous type program where they offer relocation programs, could have an impact on the cost. Oops, sorry. So for our example purposes for today's presentation, I'm going to be basing the cost estimate on a family of 4 relocating from Calgary to Toronto. They are a homeowner at origin, so a homeowner in Calgary. Their average salary, or their salary, is $100,000, and the home value is $475,000. Oops, I keep advancing too far. So some of the typical home sale costs in a domestic relocation would be the appraisals, especially if you're offering a guaranteed home sale program that Tricia explained earlier, the inspection, or potentially a survey if needed for a real property report. The real estate commissions, as you can see, are the largest component of the cost, and there's legal fees, the mortgage discharge penalty, and the home sale incentive. Now, home sale incentive is something that a company like my company may offer to an employee if they sell their home, to avoid that home going into inventory, because we would prefer that they sell it on their own rather than the company buy that home from the employee, which is intended to be a fallback plan. So we would maybe provide them an offer to say that if they sold it within the first 30 days, we would give them a percentage of that sale. Or if they sold it within 60 days, it might be a lower percentage. You could do it on a tiered approach, or just say if you sell it before the 90 days, when we would normally take that home over, you might get a bonus just to do that, to avoid us to take that home into our program. So to continue some of those costs, typical home purchase expenses would be legal fees, appraisal. If typically an appraisal would only be required if you needed to do so for financial purposes. So some lenders may say, we want an appraisal to make sure the home value meets what we're going to finance for that home. And so you might have to cover the cost of an appraisal, cost of an inspection to protect the employee, and the land transfer tax, because in this example, they're moving to Ontario, so the land transfer tax will apply, which is a significant portion of the cost here, as you can see. So moving into Ontario, it would probably be around 10, even possibly 15,000, depending on the value of the home, for that cost. So you can see that would be a big chunk of the cost incurred. Other expenses that would be incurred would be the cost to send the employee to view homes, so a house hunting trip for the employee and typically their spouse, a final move trip, so that would be the employee and the entire family. So if it's between Toronto and Calgary, we of course would be paying airfare for each of the family members. Temp living at destination. You may even have to provide some temp living at origin if their house is being packed up and they need to be present while their home is being packed and everything is being loaded on the truck. Household goods shipment, you'll see, is the largest component of the other expenses. Typically, shipment of goods can be anywhere from 20,000, 25,000, depending on the amount of goods that they have and the whether there's any special crating required or some of the other costs that might be incurred. Duplicate carrying house costs would be provided if they have are still maintaining ownership of their home in origin, in this case Calgary, and also have purchased a home but haven't moved yet into their new home, but they've taken possession and therefore they're carrying two homes, so you might consider providing a duplicate carrying cost. Spousal assistance to assist the spouse in finding employment in the new location. Subsidies and cost of living allowances. So sometimes cost of living allowances, if it's a higher cost of living center that they're moving into, companies may provide an allowance for a period of time, typically up to 3 years, for them to adjust to that higher cost of living. And then there's the miscellaneous expense allowance or miscellaneous relocation allowance, which is typically either equivalent to 1 month's salary, or in Quebec 2 weeks salary, or whatever the company may decide. It could be a percentage of income. There we go. So the total cost in this example, you'll see, is 151. Now that includes the tax gross up. So as Tricia had talked about earlier, the majority of the costs are not taxable in Canada, but there are some costs that are considered taxable. So the total cost, if you were to add up the previous 3 slides, actually comes to 121. And that would be the home sale expenses, the home purchase, and the other expenses. But then you have to apply a gross up on items that are taxable that the company would tax protect the employee on. So I've estimated that to be around 30,000. And that would be based on some of those cash benefits, like the cost of living allowance or any of the subsidies, fees that would be considered taxable by Revenue Canada. So I've added in here approximately 30,000 for tax gross up on this type of a program. So because it is a huge cost impact to companies, why are companies continuing to relocate employees if the cost is prohibitive to some companies? And the 2019 CERC Employee Relocation Policy Survey tells us that the highest reason for relocating employees is that it's to meet business needs. So this is a huge undertaking, but it would be to meet business needs. So if a company like my company was to say, we really need this person, we would be looking to spend those kind of costs. So next we'll move into the poll question. And the poll question is, what is the average cost of a domestic relocation in Canada based on a generous program? Is it A, 50,000, B, 100,000, or C, 150? So I'll give you a few minutes to answer that question. And when we talked about a generous program, that would be the example that I provided to you, where there would be assistance for cost of living allowance, assistance for maybe a home sale bonus or some subsidies, et cetera. If you were to look at a cost that program that did not offer that, the program would be less. So it could be reduced down to less than 100,000, but then you'd still have to factor in the gross up.
And it looks like we've got all our votes in, so let's see what people are saying.
Exactly. That's based on a generous program. You're absolutely right. The 100,000 would be if it was a less generous program, perhaps maybe not in an oil and gas industry perspective, but still need to move the employees, so you would just be looking at some of the standard typical costs, then it would be closer to the 100,000. So you're absolutely right in your answers. So that's excellent. Thank you. And now I'll pass it on to Steve, and he can manage the question and answers and move it forward.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Cindy, Tricia, Lisa. We do have one question. I think you did an excellent job of covering the issues and sharing the information that we have gathered through the survey. So thank you very much. Question that came in from one of the participants this afternoon, and I think any of you can probably weigh in on this, and I'm sure all of you have got some thoughts. Here's the question. In the current situation, do you have any recommendations in regard to delaying the home sale and purchase until further notice? And how long of a delay is appropriate? Not sure if you're seeing any if you've had any experience on that in the current circumstances.
Cindy, I was going to say you should. We've had this conversation. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have.
Okay, there you go. Great experiences.
Yeah, so with my company, we have made that decision because of the current COVID situation. Employees are not able to show their homes. They're not allowed to have people in their home, nor do they want to. So from our perspective, from a health and safety perspective, we're asking employees to hold off. So if they're able to work remotely, or if they hadn't actually already completed that process and are in the process of relocating, then we are asking them to stay put. And the direction we've been giving our employees is please stay put until further notice, meaning until either the travel restrictions or the site access restrictions have been lifted. At this point, my company is only allowing what we call essential functions access to our site, so they can't even go to the site. So there's no point having them wrap up their family and pack everything and move when they can't even go to site. So stay where they're at, work remotely until further notice, but there is no definitive timeline around that.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. Yeah. Lisa, what are you seeing from some of your clients on that, or are you at this point? Any thoughts?
Absolutely. In Canada and in the US, very much like Cindy, our clients are pausing, are putting their initiations on pause. If transferees are in a home sale program and they have their home listed, they've been told to pause it, to take it off the market, just to until further notice. Very much like Cindy, they're working from home, doing whatever they can, but the companies are not prepared to support relocation at this time. And if they're in process, all they're doing is just taking it on a case-by-case basis. Interestingly, and that's another discussion, temporary accommodation is really turning out to be a very hot issue with COVID-19, because people are already there, but their goods can't come, families can't come, so they're needing longer to stay in temp accom. Interesting.
Yeah, we had some discussions about that on another webinar a couple of weeks ago, where people are, they're out of country too, and they've been trying to coordinate the visas and the work permits and accommodations because simply people couldn't travel, and equally people here in Canada, they're facing some very difficult times in terms of how they're situating them and how they're managing them. At the end of the day, it's all about people. We've got all of these rules and regulations and things in place, but my goodness, the implications that it's having on individuals and their families from these perspectives, I feel very sorry for them, folks that are caught up in this.
Indeed, it is.
Okay, Tricia, any thoughts on that question?
No, just from a duty of care perspective, I think employers are taking the position that, stay safe, keep you and your family safe, and let's make sure that we, once we're on the other side of this, we can resume discussions of things we were, talking about in the past. One of the other things I just would add from a temporary accommodation perspective is that some of the Tempacom providers who don't have folks in units are putting those units forward for the frontline workers in hospitals, nurses, doctors who can't go home to their families, to allow them the space to isolate while they're doing that important work. So it's a pretty special industry, and my heart is warmed to hear that some of the folks in our industry are really putting their best foot forward to support the initiative to keep everyone safe.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I see that happening right across Canada. Well, right across around the world. I'm seeing it from our colleagues in Europe and in Asia. We do have a session with CHPA coming up week after next. That's looking at some of the implications for temp accommodations, so corporate housing. So stay tuned for that. Well, look, I'm mindful of the time. I do thank you very much for the presentation this afternoon. Very informative, as usual. And I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. And hey, listen, if you've got questions that come to mind after today's session, we do have the session next week, and the 22nd, and again on the 29th. So don't feel that you don't have an opportunity to pose those questions in the interim. If you drop us a note at info@cerc.ca, if things come up based on the session today, we'll be more than happy to deal with those next week as well. So I'd just like to again thank our speakers this afternoon. Again, we've got the 22nd and 29th reserved, 2 p.m. Eastern Time for those sessions. And here's the contact info for our presenters this afternoon. If you'd like to drop them a note, if you need anything, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to help you out. And I will say thank you to our sponsor again this afternoon, Whitecoat Workforce Mobility. Laura, you did a great job again organizing things for us. Can't thank you enough. I know you've got a million things on your plate. So we'll say goodbye to everybody for today. I wish you a good day. Stay safe, stay healthy. I look forward to speaking with you again on April the 22nd. Bye-bye.